Engineer for TY Lin. Our office is in Falmouth. I work remotely from my house here in Presque Isle. Presque Isle is my hometown. I did move away for a while, but the plan was always to move back home, which I did about 12 years ago. I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to be a part of this. So I appreciate you guys coming. Before we go through the outline, I just want to introduce the team first to start, if I can. So Tyler Brown, City Manager, Jay Cam, Northern Maine Development Commission, who I don't believe is with us tonight. He's part of the team. Jared Farn-Gillette, Maine DOT Planner. Jen Grant, actually the head of the Bureau of Planning for Maine DOT, is with us as well tonight. From TY Lin, we have myself, Tom Errico, Senior Traffic Engineer, and Sean Davis, who works in our office as well. And we have Mitch Razor, who's our landscape architect. So just a quick look at, what are we talking about tonight? So first thing is, for people that are new to this, haven't been to any of the previous public meetings, what is the VPI? What is this program we're talking about? We'll look at what the study area actually was. What parts of the city do we encompass? We'll talk about the purpose and need of the study, which is an important piece. So the onset of this was initiated by the city some time ago. So the city reached out to Maine DOT to engage in this partnership. And at the onset and early in the study, we identified, frankly, why are we doing this and how do we know that we need to do it? That's what the third item there is about. We'll do a quick summary of what the concepts are, and during the question and answer period, we can circle back to that, look at various graphics as needed. And then we'll just give a breakdown of sort of an in-depth look at, what if we move forward with this, what are we getting out of this? What are some of the key components of the construction? And we'll talk about some considerations that we've looked at so far, and then we'll just open it up. So to the extent that we can, we'd like to just keep question and comments to the end, so we just get through it, and then, like I said, we can circle back as needed. So I won't read the slide to you. I realize that the font is somewhat small, but the key points are in bold. The one that I would emphasize before I open it up to Jared and Jen for some opening remarks is this bottom sentence here. This study that we've completed here is really for planning activities. So it's not intended for project design. And I just emphasize that because everything we're going to look at today is a concept. It's a concept that's been developed to the level enough to seek grant funding. So the dimensions that you see, the concepts that you see, there's nothing that you're going to see today that's set in stone, that can't be tweaked, altered, adjusted, given local considerations. It's a really key point that I think some people may be confused about. I think there may be a conception that, this is kind of a done deal, and really we're at the beginning. So I just want to emphasize that. I would invite Jared and Jen, either or both, to give some opening remarks.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Jared Farn-Gillette. I am the regional planner for Regions 4 and 5, which includes Aroostook County, as well as a tribal liaison. I'm the project manager with DOT for this project. And the municipality reached out to DOT to explore the scope of services for a village partnership initiative. And this is a municipally led endeavor with DOT as a partner and providing technical assistance and other resources to the consultant team, and we onboard a third-party consultant to provide us with not only concepts, but also we do go through an analysis and a feasibility study. So we are working within known right-of-way and providing models and looking at previous data. We also incorporate demographics, comprehensive plans, and other studies that have been done up to date. This is a process that is multi-phase. So we start now we're at the concept and feasibility, then we go to preliminary engineering, and then we use those two components to go after federal discretionary grants. And the reason why we go through this process is, people have heard me say this a lot, in Maine DOT, we have been very successful at ensuring that we have safe and efficient highways so that you can get from A to B safely and as efficiently and quickly as possible. But what we've not been able to do with our budgetary constraints for a very long time is make lasting investments in the historic community villages and downtowns of the municipalities that we serve. And so this is a process where, and this is a vision from our commissioner, we can get you from A to B fairly well. And contrary to what some people may think, Region 5 has got some great highways and they're well maintained. But when you get to B, we want to have a reason for people to get out, spend some money, drop a buck, as well as create quality of life, ADA compliance, safety, and a durable system for residents that currently live in a community and then may choose to live in a community. And so this is the process. And, you know, I will say, you know, we do have some key words up there. I will say too, time sensitive. This is also a program that allows us to slightly expedite Maine DOT process. A lot of people say we work very slow, too slow, nothing ever gets done. By going through this process, we can get projects that are fairly expensive that without federal discretionary funding we would not be able to do into the work plan and provide the types of lasting, durable investments for communities, infrastructure, and transportation systems that we've historically not been able to do to this degree. And through this process, not only do we get to make investments in your transportation infrastructure, we can also include elements that enhance sense of place, local character, and enhance the look, feel, and character of your community. You know, lighting is an essential component of a safe system. Through this process, we can also think about architectural lighting, like what will your downtown look like for the next generation? And that's really all I have to say at this point, and I'll take other questions about policy later, and I'll hand it over to the consultants to run through the models and the studies and analysis done thus far.
Thanks, Jared. Go back to this again, just to give people a quick look at this. We're going to look at the study area. We'll talk about the needs. We'll talk through the concepts. We'll dig into that a little bit, and then we'll open it up. To start, you know, what is the study area? So for those of you that aren't familiar with this, it starts down around Umpy at the University Street bike path crossing, and essentially goes up to the mall. There's a small part of it that extends to the west, Riverside Park area, State Street Bridge, and the area that's affectionately known as the Five Fingers of Death intersection, abbreviated just 5 fingers for this presentation today. So this is the purpose and need. So just to sort of boil this down, you know, why did we do this? So the purpose, again, I won't read these slides to you, but we need to identify infrastructure improvements that improve safety, accessibility, and support development. Typically, you know, these are accomplished by some of these sub-bullets. You know, traffic calming. What does that mean? It means using geometric changes to slow cars down. Crash reduction, there are some high crash locations. We'll touch on that. Increase pedestrian safety and mobility, and enhance active transportation systems. The other key purpose is, you know, as Jared was alluding to with respect to the village character and enhancements with respect to things like architectural lighting and sort of the overall feel. You know, what can be done to support the existing character and anticipated growth. So these are things like green space, trees, lighting, flexible space. So the need for the study, you know, how did we identify that this should happen? So the needs were demonstrated by this list here. Again, I won't read them all, but like some of the key ones: high vehicle speeds, unsafe pedestrian crossings, high crash locations, lack of sidewalk in some areas. Key one being, you'll hear me talk about it a few times, west side of Main Street from Park Street to Rice Street. No sidewalk there. A lot of pedestrian use, no facility. Overall bicycle and connectivity issues. So one thing we heard at both public meetings back in June and October, you know, the bike path has a small loop at the end, but in general isn't a loop and doesn't connect to the west or to the north. Unlike many towns in Maine, there's significant issues with ADA compliance up and down the entire Route 1 corridor. And in general, there could be improvements related to streetscaping and lighting. So just to dive into the recommendations, a few things off the top just to sort of explain what we're looking at here. So we'll look at plan views, which is what this is, and then we'll look at, you know, a cross section, kind of like a picture of a street view, if you will, that compare sort of a conceptual before and after. So in this picture, this is University Street. This is the crossing right here. This is the bike path heading up to the tennis courts. So in this picture, the key takeaway from this, and really the key takeaway from all of the graphics that we're going to show on Main Street, is geometric changes to accomplish traffic calming while increasing pedestrian connectivity. So in general terms, this is a reduction in lanes. So in this section, as most people that, I think everybody in this room probably lives here and drives here, it's 2 lanes heading out of town, up the hill towards Holden. one lane coming into town. So this concept reduces this to just a 2-lane section, and the available width is repurposed for a multi-use trail, which is shown in purple, and green is obviously green space. So to look at that as a comparison of before and after in a section view, on the left, this is the existing template, 2 southbound lanes, 1 northbound lane, existing sidewalk, variable width shoulders. We repurposed this width for 1 northbound, 1 southbound lane, and green space with a multi-use trail. So then coming into downtown, similar concept, but slightly different configuration because the existing template is 4 lanes once you get down past Maple Street. So the Maple Street to Chapman Street piece, in this picture, what you're seeing is southbound lane, northbound lane, a center double left turn lane. Blue is sidewalk, and again, purple is path, green is green space. One thing I would point out in this plan view before we move to the sections is that the connectivity of the bike path from University Street to the downtown and to the recreational facility areas was a key component that was identified. And this picture shows the primary alternative, which is coming to Chapman Street and potentially utilizing Chapman Street itself. The alternative route, one that was identified, is in yellow, using Ryan and Robert Streets, again, to get down to the existing bike path and rec facilities. So in plan view, what does this look like as a comparison? So the 4-lane section, 4 lanes. This is from, Sandwich Shop, heading north. Parking on both sides. It's narrow, 7.5 feet at best, sidewalk on both sides. So a repurposing of that width looks something like this. So again, 1 northbound, 1 southbound lane, center double left lane. And the available width from the removal of one of the lanes is repurposed into green space and the multi-use path. So just to give a sort of a pictorial look at that, this is existing conditions right around that area. This is the crosswalk. This is the crosswalk that used to have the crossing guard when the outdoor pool was there. So now this crosswalk, it's one of the longer ones in the city. That's more than 60 feet to cross the road there. No signs, no lights. And this is an area where speeds are high. We crossed this morning actually to go talk to a local business owner. It's fairly substantial existing width for the present traffic volume. So, one potential repurposing of this, so this is a sort of a rendering of the 3-lane section. So 3-lane sections over here, and then this is, added green space, multi-use path. I would emphasize that, there's nothing set in stone about the width of these things, the presence of these trees, the species of these trees, the spacing of these trees. These are all preliminary engineering level decisions that are yet to be made, but in concept, it sort of looks like this. And to give you an example of one that's been built, that we designed, this is US Route 1 in Falmouth, very similar traffic volume to Route 1 here in Presque Isle. And this is the Esplanade, multi-use path. This is a great picture actually because you have all the uses all happening in this one picture. I think Tom got kind of lucky when he took this picture, but cars, here's your center double left lane, pedestrian across the street, person on a bike, architectural lighting, banners, it's all here. So just as an example of what that portion could look like. So Chapman Street to Blake Street, pretty similar configuration. Again, 3 lanes, center double left. What I would emphasize in this picture is the blue. Blue is sidewalk. There's a widening of the existing sidewalk that comes with this, and also a widening of the existing parking. So when we look at that comparison in section, 4 lanes, narrow on-street parking, 7.5 feet, and you see the sidewalk widths are 12 and 10 respectively here. This concept essentially brings the gutter line in 4 feet on both sides. So sidewalks get about 4 feet wider on both sides. The on-street parking is normalized to a width of 8 feet on both sides, and we just maintain this center double left concept. Riverside Drive North, like most people again are pretty familiar with this area. So this is the refrigerated truck sort of parking area. Just conceptually, one thing we looked at was this could potentially be one-way southbound. One-way southbound could work here because the modeling that Tom will show supports left turns at State Street. So those are currently prohibited. People still do it. I can tell you that for sure because I counted cars there. So 2 or 3 people an hour still make a left where you're not supposed to at State Street, but the modeling and the design support left turn allowances at that intersection. So in terms of, you know, flexible space and outdoor uses that we talked about and the purpose and need, you know, Riverside Drive North is a key area that's underutilized at present, you know, that could potentially be an extension of Riverside Park. You know, this could be food trucks, this could be flexible space, you know, green space, trees, boat ramps below the dam, things of that nature. Out to the west, 2 components here to talk about. One is this, you know, somewhat infamous intersection. So Five Fingers intersection. There were 3 alternatives that we looked at. One was the sort of the do nothing option, which would you just leave it as it is. Frankly, it's not a high crash location now, as identified by Maine DOT criteria. We looked at a roundabout, so traffic circle. Think of the one just north of here in Caribou by Cary Medical Center, that sort of concept. And then there was this concept that's being presented here, which is really a simplification of the 5-way intersection into something that could function as a 4-way intersection. Now, it doesn't look like a typical 4-way intersection because the skew angles are really extreme. But by closing a small portion of Dyer Street, teeing it off into Parson Street as shown here, there's some park space that could be utilized. It's a simplification of the movements to a 4-way, and in general supports simplified pedestrian movements, which is a key component. So again, I come back to the purple that we talked about at the beginning. So the path down South Main Street connects to Riverside Park, it connects to Riverside Drive. There's a segment on Riverside Drive North that connects up by the high school, and I'll show a map of all the multi-use path segments in just a second. But the reason I emphasize this here is that the multi-use path crosses to the west side of town, which it does not now. So how do we accomplish that? So this is a real conceptual before and after of State Street Bridge. On this side, you know, the existing conditions, 4 lanes, 12 feet, virtually no separation for pedestrian use of this sidewalk. This is one concept to bring the trail and an extension of the park over the bridge. It's a reduction to 2 lanes. I will say that based on yesterday's meeting, we've received some feedback already about this concept. There probably are some alterations to these dimensions that could be made to accommodate some concerns we've already heard. But I would emphasize that the key component is improved and separated pedestrian connectivity to the west side of the city. So Main Street North, so Park Street to the mall, basically. Not shown graphically, but some really key components that need to happen as part of that. I mentioned the lack of a sidewalk between Park Street and Rice Street. That would be one. There are some crossings, particularly the one at Walmart. From a pedestrian standpoint, there's no landing whatsoever on the Walmart side. So that pedestrian crossing is highly dysfunctional as it stands. There are some access management modifications that could happen. So narrowing of excessively wide entrances, you know, businesses that may have multiple entrances, you know, could those be reconfigured? Again, the reason we do that is so a person on the sidewalk doesn't have to cross an 80-foot driveway if they don't need to. I'm just using round numbers here, but just to illustrate. And intersection enhancements, so traffic signal upgrades. I'll talk about this on the next couple slides, but one important component to the project is new traffic lights on the entire corridor. So Chapman Street, Academy Street, State Street, North Street, Walmart, and Maysville, you know, can be brought up to a more modern standard with vehicle detection, the ability for emergency vehicles to interrupt the signal, GPS, things like that. So this is a map of multi-use path segments. So this is a real zoomed out view. So black is the existing bike path, and white are potential new segments. So starting at the south, there's the crossing at Umpy. You see a couple of alternative ways to get down to Riverside Park here. This is Riverside Drive South. This is Riverside Drive North. So there's one connection. So this is the area we looked at where the trucks park, flexible space. So either using Blake Street or Allen Street, potentially connecting back up to the bike path by the high school. And then this is the connection to the west. And the map really tells the story, which is that there is very little connection in the northern and western parts of the city. So To get back to the west, somehow you have to get back across the stream. So there are two alternatives for a new pedestrian bridge that we've looked at. This one's sort of in the area of Veterans Park, North Street. And this one is sort of up near Dragon's Plant, Conley Street, that kind of area, with the potential to come across in behind Walmart. There's an opportunity here to tie into a new sidewalk that would tie to existing right at Rice Street. There may be an opportunity there for signalized pedestrian crossing, but those are sort of PE level conversations. Again, I would emphasize that everything we talked about, these are planning level ideas that to progress to the next phase really need some preliminary engineering. So these next two slides, we call them key components of construction. Really what this amounts to is, if this project gets built, what are you getting? What are you getting other than these, pretty pictures that we're showing here today? So full depth reconstruction of Main Street. What does that mean? That is the way to deal with the pavement rutting issue that's on Main Street. So the treatment that went through this summer is the treatment that Maine DOT will continue to do on a 5 to 7 year cycle. It frankly looks and rides pretty nice now, but it does not get at the core issue, which is needing to dig up the road. So excavation and replacement of sub-base material, new pavement, and a pavement section that's designed for modern standards. So that's the full depth piece. Stormwater drainage. So stormwater drainage on Main Street is in disrepair. That's both a maintenance issue and a safety issue with pooling water, water in the ruts. That's an ongoing issue that's year-round. It's difficult in the summer and winter with snow buildup in the ruts. Again, new system, current standards. New traffic signals, we talk about that. So right now there's some signal timing issues. So we recommend new lights and control cabinets with vehicle detection, and we talked to police and fire chiefs about equipment to introduce GPS signal interruption. So basically the lights know where the emergency vehicles are and can give them green lights to get to where they need to be. Improved crosswalks. We've looked at that in the picture. A lot of the crosswalks are too long because the road is too wide. A lot of the crosswalks don't have any warning signs whatsoever. Some of the signals, particularly the one at Rodney's, there are more modern systems that could be implemented there. New sidewalks, so widening of sidewalks, removal of the brick esplanade, which is a maintenance issue. Addition of sidewalk, again, on that west side of Main Street. The wider sidewalks, they present a business opportunity for people to be doing, retail, outdoor dining, things of that nature. At present, it's probably challenging, just given the condition and the width. So there's a potential benefit to that. Improved multi-use path system. Again, the bike path doesn't have loops really, other than the small loop by the park. And there's really poor connection to the west and to the north. New pedestrian bridge. Again, that promotes the access to the west and to the north and to the retail area in the north. And then improved aesthetics. So green space, architectural lighting, things of that nature. So project-specific considerations. So these are things, and this is the last couple slides, and then we'll just open it up. Tom's going to show the results of the model with respect to one of these bullets. But think of this as things that we've been talking about in the last few months. Things have been identified as, potential issues, and identified at the planning phase. So emergency vehicle response. 3-lane section, how do they get through town? So the center double left lane, one thing we looked at, in some towns we would recommend a raised center island, for pedestrian refuge. Here that doesn't make sense from a snow plowing standpoint and from an emergency vehicle standpoint. So we've eliminated that, and we talked to them about the GPS signal interruption. Truck turning movements, and I would actually sort of lump these two together actually. Truck turning movements and farm equipment access, something that we talked about just today actually, which is a great conversation. We've looked at truck turning templates from a design vehicles perspective, so that's what they call a WB67, which is basically a trailer truck. But we were fortunate enough to get some input from Linwood, and he told us what the widths of his equipment that he works on are, and took us for a ride and actually showed us around. So we've got some insight now to adjustments to widths to continue to allow farm equipment to get where they need to be. Winter maintenance, we met with Dana and Public Works, so the new sidewalks, at least from a temporary standpoint, they do provide some snow storage. Does snow still need to be hauled? Yes. We talked about some strategies for that. Access management changes. So again, long driveways, multiple driveways. There are some considerations there. Business deliveries, that was one that came up a lot is, and if it's a 3-lane section, how do we make deliveries? Well, the center double left lane, provides that temporary access. And in the downtown core, the on-street parking, which in our observation is rarely full, also provides an opportunity for people to pull over and, in that 10, 15, 20 minutes it takes to make a delivery. We anticipate that could be used for that. Storefront visibility is something that came up. So when people think of the Esplanade and the trees, they think of what's the access and the visibility to my storefront going to be. So some considerations there are what type of trees are they? What's the spacing of them? And is there an opportunity to have a sign in the Esplanade? Things like that. And the last one, which is probably one of the more key ones, is traffic congestion and mobility. So Main Street's been 4 lanes pretty much my whole life, and does it need to be? So from a volume standpoint, the modeling indicates that at present it's over-designed, and we made some assumptions about growth and some assumptions about whether or not people actually use the Prescott bypass. Jen and Jared can speak to this as much as they would like to. The bypass is in the work plan. The money is appropriated. The second phase of the bypass is going to get built. Now, what is the actual ridership of that or usership of that? From a engineering standpoint with respect to the functionality of a 3-lane section, we looked at a conservative approach of no one uses it, all the way up to what the study for the bypass said, which is 15% of people use it. Tom will show the results of that model. This is the last slide. I just want to point out for people that maybe weren't able to attend either of the other public meetings. So just a quick history, of what's gone on with this project. I think there may be some potential misunderstanding about, how long this has been going on and number of meetings and have we talked about this and have we engaged with the public. So this is a great turnout. I will say that this is a fantastic turnout. This is the second night in a row that we filled this room. So that's outstanding. And it's very much appreciated. So working from the bottom up, we're here, so we're at these public information sessions now. So I start at the bottom here because 2 reasons. Number one, we're not done. So this is kind of really, even though it's the second to last bullet, this is kind of the beginning. This is kind of the point where the town needs to make a decision about, are we going to appropriate funding to move forward with a grant application and the city's portion of the match? And there's discussion to be had about that tonight about that. But with respect to, how do we get here? This started off back when Galen Weibly was here. There were boards in City Hall before we were even under contract. We went under contract in February 23, walked the site. We went to a couple of meetings, Downtown Revitalization Committee. We had first public meeting in June, second in October. And since then, and some of this has to do with changes in the city government. There's Galen left. Martin left, so we got a new city manager, we've had some changes on the city council, so to react to that and to sort of maintain continuity, we've had several meetings with department heads and city manager, city councilors, between the last public meeting in October and now, including a city council meeting, back in August, and of course tonight. So before we open this up, I'm going to turn it over to Tom. Tom's going to show the results of the traffic modeling, and then we'll just open this thing up.
Well, good evening. Again, my name is Tom Erico, Senior Traffic Engineer with TY Land. A couple things before I show you the model, a little bit of background in terms of how we developed the model. Chris actually conducted traffic counts at intersections within the downtown in terms of he actually was out there in the field counting how many cars and trucks and pedestrians walking through intersections for an hour to help us understand those movements. Those movements tell us a lot how intersections function. And so we plug that information into the model. So the amount of cars, trucks that are turning, the type of characteristics the intersections have in terms of number of lanes, how long the stacking distance are, and so forth. So we plug that in. A couple things to note. This model did assume those signals were fully replaced. What Chris talked about as part of this project, it would include full replacement of those signals. So new cabinets, new supports, signal heads, everything would get replaced. And an important part of that is there would be new vehicle detection. So the system would be working very efficiently. And would be based upon the demand. And all the signals along the corridor would be coordinated. So we have technology now so that when you leave Chapman, you're going to get through Academy, you're going to get through State, and you can continue through the system. So it's a very efficient system. Where today, quite frankly, the systems aren't very efficient, and there's a little bit of issue there. So that's sort of a preface about the data that fed into this. Chris talked about growth. The model that I'm showing you assumed that there is a 10% growth of traffic, within the system. We know the bypass is going to happen, and it's going to have some impact on traffic. We know based upon some DOT models that about 15% is going to divert to the traffic, so there'll be less traffic on Main Street. But we assume growth, 10% growth, just as a conservative matter, just to make sure the system is going to work okay. And then lastly, before I get into this, if you really, sit down and watch these intersections, you guys know these intersections better than I, in many cases, you're not getting 4 lanes of capacity through this area. This is not a 4-lane segment area where cars just flow through. In many cases, when you arrive at an intersection, so if you're traveling northbound on State, what happens is many of the vehicles are turning left on the State. And so in actuality, that lane becomes a default left turn lane, where most vehicles are going left on the State, and then you have through movements that end up in the outside lane. And similarly, going southbound at Academy, the left turn vehicles sort of dominate that lane and basically becomes a default left turn lane. So in essence, you're not losing, one full lane of capacity in this corridor when you're going from 4 to 3, something less than that. So basically, I'm going to kind of walk through a little bit about the model. The model, ultimately shows, I'm going to speed it up a little bit. This is a model that we traditionally use to understand how traffic's going to flow through the area. We modeled 3 intersections in the corridor, focused in on the downtown core. So basically Chapman, Academy, and State. And it flows reasonably well. Typically, there are certain standards that we apply in terms of, what kind of delay and queuing. You'll see, this was an hour simulation. We simulated for an hour time period. There are time periods when there are queues and it backs up. During that simulation, I'm just kind of moving it through at times. So basically, the model shows that, traffic moves reasonably well, and I'll just sort of move through the system a little bit now, so you can see. It's not perfectly operating, but it operates at an acceptable condition. It's not creating, gridlock conditions within the system. In many cases, it's operating as well as it does now. And so these are the 2 intersections down below. I'm going to just move it ahead a little bit. There's some queuing. Traffic. You guys know it. Traffic. There's a good amount of traffic here, but based upon the modeling. And the modeling provides us with vehicle delays and queuing information. The system will work, reasonably well based upon our analysis. And as Chris said, moving forward, will be, if this moves forward to PE, that preliminary engineering phase of the project, there'll be more modeling, additional analysis that will be performed as part of the design process. So with that, I think we are going to open it up to questions.
Tyler, anything that you want to start off with, mention, speak to?
No, just want to say thank you guys again very much. The team that's been here, they've been here for a couple of days. They've been working on this project for the past 18 months plus, and even going as far as not just studying traffic, but going on tractor rides and
you guys comment to the funding ratios and the scale of project?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Jared.
So through this process, what we are able to do, for every $1 we ask the municipality to match with us, Maine DOT will match $1 and we will leverage 8 federal dollars. That's a 1-to-9 ratio in infrastructure investments. And it's probably one of the most amazing deals I've ever heard of in regards to infrastructure, as well as, we do ask for a 10% match to help offset the cost of preliminary engineering, which is at 10% of project costs. And I would state, too, that Senator Collins secured $1.6 million in congressionally designated spending to help defer the cost of preliminary engineering for the municipality. But basically it's a 1-to-9. So this is a $30 million total project. We're asking a $3,070,000 match from municipality, which does not have to be obligated until 2027. And the Department of Transportation does understand that is a significant amount of money for any community, but through this process, we can bring $27 million other dollars in infrastructure.
Yes, ma'am.
Looking at this presentation, the one issue that I see that has not been addressed is the Amish people with their horse and buggy. 4 lanes, if they're in front of you, we have an opportunity to go around them. But if we're into a 3-lane, how is that being addressed? Because we're seeing more and more now.
Okay, so the question is how will we function with the Amish community, right? How will we integrate? Very similar probably to the farming as well. But do you want to take that, Tom?
Yeah, I can take that. We thought about that. That was a question that came up during some of those early public meetings, and there'll be instances where there'll be, some slow down time periods, when that carriage is going along, and you'll have to use, you'll pass, that center lane can be used for, various purposes, and so you'll have to slow down and ultimately go around those carriages. So there'll be some disruption. We know they do happen.
The bike path idea is nice, but just leave the 4 lanes still on Main Street and get rid of parking, you've got all kinds of room. The problem is parking on Main Street. Because people don't pay attention, people open the doors, they clean mirrors off, you give them a little bit more room, yes, but it's still gonna be a problem.
You're right.
You aren't gonna deviate traffic that much, even with the bypass, whenever it gets built, if it ever does, and there's no real, it's a great project.
Yeah, so when we looked at the crash data, you're absolutely right. Actually, one of the high crash locations within the study area is the downtown core, and it is parked vehicles getting hit. Because Chris showed the cross-section, the parking lanes are substandard in width. They're actually too narrow. And so the project really looks at, may not have been evident, but we're looking at widening those parking spaces to give people a little bit more room to get by is the intent. And so we're thinking about really improving safety as part of this project. The other thing I would note, and this is based upon sort of national data, 4 lanes are typically unsafe roadways. Just because people are stopping in through lanes to turn and they create rear-end collisions, what we have found from national trends, that there's a 53% reduction in crashes by going from a 4-lane section that you have right now to a 3-lane section where people can get into that turn lane, get away from the through vehicles, and it minimizes crash patterns with this type of configuration.
Good question over there.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Question on, this is more to deal with the, I guess, the design on the foliage and all that. How are you gonna deal with salt? I don't think, we went through a period of time here when we had trees, and you don't see the trees anymore, I think, on the road, on the side. And you have salt issues, which would be a consideration.
Do you want to take that, Mitch? So we actually have, so Mitch is a landscape architect on the project.
Oh, sure, thanks. That's a great question. We have to deal with that in all the cities. We deal with salt and the issue with roots and trees. And you've seen, I think, a lot of your trees on Main Street suffer and not really thrive because of that. So over the years, we've developed better ways of having safer root systems. With it, we have raised beds that keep the salt out of that. we can also plant and specify tree species that are hardier, that can withstand the salt. Because I think you've seen probably over like last 20 years, many of your trees die and not succeed. We don't want to repeat that. So this is an opportunity to do it in a way where you have trees that are healthy and can succeed. So, and to do it right. Because what you sort of see out there now is sort of like half attempts at doing it right. And a lot of those tree pits are sort of insufficient, and the water washes right into them, and the salt from the, so this is a chance to do it correctly and to allow trees to really grow healthy and to have proper root zones, either in the greenway or within those sidewalk areas. So that's a great question. And we've been seeing that more and more, just better ways to plant trees, shrubs that are salt tolerant and can withstand that. Great question, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
How long has this study been going on?
The study's been going on roughly 18 months. Almost closer to 2 years, yeah.
And this is the first that many of us that I've talked to in this community have heard about it.
Yes.
So I guess my question is, how much did it cost, and why did the citizens not know about it earlier?
Good point. So the preliminary, when the city entered into an agreement with T.Y. Lin to do the original study, that was roughly, Mike was there at the time, roughly about 110,000 for the study itself. 112. The preliminary engineering, which is the next phase, that would be 307,000. That's the next phase of this. And then the overall cost to us here in Presque Isle is $3.3 million. If we were to move forward with the project. And
The study is 300,000.
the cost of this study, the cost to get here today was roughly $110,000. I don't have the final bills.
None of that stuff is voted on by the citizens, is that correct?
I don't believe it was, no. No. So I will just say, I will take it. I have been here since February, so this is on me that no one has had communication. And I apologize that over the past 6 months you have not heard about this project and you have not been informed. That is not the goal of this project. The goal is to be collaborative, and the goal is to ensure community support and togetherness.
It's
So.
not involved. I've been on the downtown committee for 25 years.
Okay.
Revitalization. And yes, I've gone a few months in the winter, but other than that, I haven't seen an email. I've seen nothing have anything to do with anything like this. So I question that.
100%. And again, I own that, and moving forward, there will be more communication than anyone probably wishes to have. So, any other? Yes, Jim.
Yes, talking about reducing accidents and how this plan will do that, I think you also need to re-educate drivers on how to drive. I do a lot of walking. Today I'm gonna get run over in a crosswalk because the vehicle didn't stop. And the lady stopped behind him, just shakes her head. I said, wow. Then you have people, again today, we are at a light, green for us, and a car comes straight through in front of us. If we pulled out, I probably, one of us won't be dead. Okay, because they were going at a high rate of speed. Secondly, you have people who run stop signs all the time. And we've talked about why not put up stop signs, like flashing stop signs that they have in other communities that I've seen. But there's a lot of things that have to be corrected in driving by people. Just restructuring, I don't think, is always going to take care of the issue.
You bring up a really good point, and actually, we have the 3 E's. One's called education, engineering, and enforcement. We do have to educate the drivers. We do have to have proper engineering, and we do have to have enforcement on the system for those who do not comply with posted speed limits, which is state statute and law. However, law enforcement is very taxed with there's a lot going on for law enforcement, and everything that is in this study, and we will be working with certain geometries, cross sections to accommodate the unique usages and needs for the transportation system in Presque Isle. But everything that is in this study is containing elements of what's called proven safety countermeasures by the Federal Highway Administration. And these are interventions and treatments that are designed to induce compliance with posted speed limit We're reducing the A to B time in pedestrian crossings to mitigate the amount of time you are in a pedestrian crossing, adding in our RFBs, responsive reflective beacons for at the pedestrian crossings as well as these treatments have been proven to to some cases reduce pedestrian injuries and fatalities by up to 77%, and that includes the esplanaded separated multi-use trail, because that has components that we call horizontal separation and vertical separation. And the width of the esplanade, that's something that we can look at and address, because 11-foot travel lanes, perhaps we need to go to 12-foot travel lanes and have a bit wider shoulder width for the traveling public. But those separations of uses are how we can accomplish safety for what's called vulnerable users on the transportation system, as well as it does slow your traffic down. Right now, we were out walking today and just eyeballing it. You had many vehicles doing 45 miles an hour past, a lot of businesses as well. And a part of this is a tool also to slow down a potential customer to a business, as well as protect the safety of pedestrians. So we do accomplish quite a bit through this process, but that's a very good point.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
I just want to say I appreciate the engineering and the research into the project, especially that we have a local person spearheading the project here. One of the things I'm most interested about is learning more about the accessibility, because I think a major issue, to your point, is that we don't have very good access for anyone who is mobility impaired, hearing impaired, or vision impaired. And just today I saw someone, vision impaired trying to walk down Main Street. So I'm excited about the opportunity to have a safer travel way from like when I'm living downtown and trying to work out at Umpy. It's very difficult for college students and for people who live downtown. So a comment and a question maybe to help explain to the community is, how is that accessibility? Most people here probably drove here. We're an automotive community. I imagine people in this room drove here, the parking lot was full. There's a lot of people who are disadvantaged in the community who walk. They walk to Walmart, they walk to the hospital all the time. So I'm excited for that opportunity, and how is that going to help the community who's the walking mobility community, not our automotive people personally.
I think you bring up a really good point, and this project would be required to design everything to ADA standards, which would also address some non-compliance issues currently within the transportation infrastructure. And by providing those ADA standards, you would have, proven, federal and state regulation for providing mobility and accessibility for alternatively abled persons, as well as, we would be putting in the detectable walks for alternatively sighted persons. And you do raise a good point about having, pedestrian and bicycle facilities. This is about also providing transportation choice and options for persons to choose in a free and democratic society how they want to get around in their community. And yes, it would be providing a safe access point from the college to downtown that is, based on federal standards and, proven metrics from Federal Highway, which are studied statistically nationally with these interventions in different places. Another component too of this is also making community age friendly, so that we do have a transportation system that is safe and comfortable for, people to use. As, it's not necessarily what we'd call universal design, but this is something that gets as close to that as I think possible with the resources and the feasibility that we have to work within our climate. So that's a great question, and I hope that answers some of it, what you're thinking of. Next question. Sorry, you've had your hand over a while.
You keep calling what we're used to calling a sidewalk a multi-function or multi-use. What else can it be used for?
That's a
Are they going to be four-wheelers? They're going to be side-by-side?
No, those would be, you can have non-motorized uses on that, so you could have a bicycle, a scooter, a skateboard, a wheelchair. It is going to be accessible for ADA standards, but it would not be for ATVs or snowmobiles or things that are, you probably also would be restricted from a level 3 e-bike, which are the ones that can go over, I think, 27 or 28 miles per hour. And I understand that that is a conflict of perhaps uses where you've got motorists and bicyclists. What we've seen in communities is you can have a stripping that says pedestrians one side, bicycles another. And why these are popular, and I have one community where I have a 10-foot wide multi-use path going past a school, past a library, into the downtown in a similar fashion. And the comment was, well, you know, what's going to happen if I have a child walking in it with also, you know, someone on a bike? And there's enough space, and people who are, you know, safe and confident, like sort of like myself, I have a mountain bike, I have a road bike. I'm okay going out into traffic. I know I'm, you know, taking my life into my hand. Riding bike is the new smoking. It'll take years off your life. But, you know, it also leaves that option for somebody with their children to also have access to safely learn to bike, and to have a place where if you're in a stroller, you can safely push your baby in a stroller. It's about providing these types of facilities that, you know, really it's about comfort and the increasing safety for those who choose to, you know, we're not the Department of Recreation, we're the Department of Transportation, but, you know, we do want to also mitigate some of the rural health outcomes, which is, you know, we want to help people have healthy lifestyles and longer lives, and promote economic activity as well. So that's
Sidewalks, oh, sorry. I didn't lose my hand. The wider sidewalks, you're saying they're gonna be wider than they are now. Who's gonna keep the snow off them in the winter? Because many times when you're trying to walk downtown, there's lots of snow on the sidewalks and it's not shoveled. And I'm hearing today from a couple of business people that I know that they don't wanna have to shovel more snow, any wider sidewalks. So how do we accommodate everybody there?
Yep, that question came up yesterday. I will hand that over to the municipality, because that's really a local issue, and we do ask that you maintain the facilities.
I can't speak for what has happened in the past. Bottom line is your sidewalks will be clear. They better be. They need to be going forward. They do. They need to be for our businesses and our people. It's not acceptable to have them unclean.
Is
Sorry.
that for the business owner downtown? Because my understanding is right now, if you're a business owner, you have to clean out your storefront.
Correct.
And the city does between.
Correct.
So would the city be doing the entire sidewalk, or is the business owner still responsible for what's in front of their business?
Talking about in this project. So for this project, we have not defined what the process will be for snow removal yet, because quite frankly, we don't know the design yet. I think at the end of the day, we would certainly partner with business owners and see what's going to work best for everyone, right? We want to keep taxes low, but we also don't want to burden you with snow removal, right? So I think for that piece, it'll be very collaborative, but for now, it definitely needs to be done. Does that answer the question? Yep, thanks.
We're also conducting a similar study in Fort Kent. And one of the things that we did is work closely with the Public Works Department to identify those cross-section elements so that their equipment can be used to help maintain some of those facilities. And then the other thing is the design of these facilities will be, you know, under current standards, so the cross slopes will be, you know, a little bit flatter, so there won't be slippery issues. But we say when you're going to build more sidewalks, you're going to build more paths, there's certainly a greater demand for maintenance for these facilities. So, you know, but the hope is we can work with the community as the design unfolds and come up with a system that works with, you know, for your department so that they can maintain it as easily as possible.
Yes, sir.
I've lived here all my life and I've seen a lot of changes. And when they were talking about the bypass, putting the bypass through, everything was about making it more efficient to get through Prescott. Go around the bypass so you can get through Prescott faster if you're going north or south, especially for big trucks. Now we're hearing we want to slow traffic down going through Prescott, which is contrary to what anybody really would like to do. They want to go, they want to get to where they want to be in a hurry, usually. They don't necessarily want to have to be slowed down. As I see the plan here, you're going to allow left-hand turns at the main section of Main and State, which is not allowed now. That's going to slow traffic down. It's going to slow people getting from where they want to go, from where they are to where they want to go. And you don't have any truck lane going south on the big hill. No truck lane, so people are going to have to chug up behind a truck to get up to Route 1 where they got a double lane. I think it's a mistake to get rid of that truck lane going up over the hill. Even if you're not in a hurry, it's ride behind the truck for half a mile before you buy it. Now, as far as the trees go and all this stuff, trees are nice, all these things are really nice, but they're gonna cost a lot of money in the future to maintain. It's gonna cost a lot of money for stone removal, and that ultimately is gonna come on the taxpayers of Presque Isle for years and years to come. It's gonna be really expensive to get around all these doodads. We're not in Florida, we're not in Georgia, we have a lot of snow, and it costs a lot of money to plow snow, to move snow. I think we ought to wind that back a little bit.
Thank you for the comment. I will say one great piece of this is we have the opportunity to innovate as well, right? In my previous life, I lived at an airport. At that airport, we had more snow than what we could ever do with. We just put it in a giant melter and it melted and went down the drain. I think that there's a lot of opportunities that we can find to innovate within this project, or even with the future of Presque Isle, whether we do this project or not, right? It's very inefficient for us to essentially load and unload snow 3 different times. And it costs a lot to the taxpayer. There's got to be an innovative solution. Don't have the smoking gun, but just to say, with this project, it does give us the opportunity to innovate as well. Either way. Next question. Oh, sorry.
Thanks for your comments, John. I just want to respond to the truck lane piece first, and then I think Mitch can talk about the trees, and we can talk about the State Street intersection too. But with respect to the 2 lanes going up the hill, so in this picture, here's the University Street bed crossing. So this transition happens. It's on this picture. So basically, you switch from 3 lanes to 2 lanes right around Maple Street. Okay. Now, south of this location, truck climbing lane remains unchanged. So basically in this picture, anything that doesn't look like sort of colored graphics on top of the aerial is unchanged existing conditions. So truck climbing lane standards are based on vehicle speed reduction and the length of the grade. And when you look at the vehicle speed reduction on the first part of the hill coming out of town, which is really short, and then it's actually a little bit downhill and then flat to get you to here. When you look at the length of that grade and the speed reduction, this area, based on federal standard, is nowhere near requiring a truck lane. Here, yes. At the beginning part, and I can't speak to your frustration about being behind a truck there, I understand what you're saying, but based on the standards that we use to design things like this, the first part doesn't warrant a truck climbing lane. Now, based on, just in general, from a more local perspective, trucks and people. Actually, I left City Hall today and I went to pick up my kids at my mom's house, and I went this way. And I was behind 2 trucks, and I followed them all the way to the Jameson Road. And they were going about 40. And was it frustrating? Yes, it was. But to be honest with you, I wasn't any more frustrated here than I was when I got to the Jameson Road, because of the fact that they were going 40 didn't change. So the reality is, I could, and frankly, I probably, if I hadn't been talking on the phone, which I shouldn't be saying in this meeting, I probably would have had the good sense to pass them by Keddies, but I didn't do that. So completely on me. But my point is the necessity from a design standard standpoint to have a truck climbing lane in the segment where we're recommending a 2-lane configuration is not necessary. Tom, you want to talk about State Street?
Yeah, I'll talk about State Street and then.
One quickly too on winter maintenance. We have implemented similar treatments in other communities that have a high snow load, especially like Bethel, Western Maine and the mountains that do get a similar number of stow volume, as well as we are currently working with Fort Kent. What we will do in the preliminary engineering process is, be reaching out and working with Public Works. We're not just going to throw a community to the snow wolves, a new word I made up about a week ago, with regards to how you're going to have to address winter maintenance and general maintenance in general going forward. So the preliminary engineering component, has quite a few extra additional value-added benefits to it, which is, we will do utilities coordination survey, as well as work with the butters and property owners and anyone who would be an impacted property during our outreach, as well as also coordinating heavily with department heads and working to address that maintenance plan, as well as a vegetation plan too. So it's just another thing to think about.
So a couple things. State Street, we looked at the modeling with allowing that left turn lane. mean, it's a little unusual. I mean, Chris talked about how people currently make that left because it's, even though it's prohibited, to make sure that would work. And I think part of the reason why we can get it to work, you're right, there's additional phasing, right, that's gonna be required for the left turn. It's gonna require a green arrow because it's gonna have to be protected. But by improving the signal system and getting better detection, we can get that to work. You know, outside of what kind of work, can it not work, Tom? Just from an accessibility perspective, you know, when I first came here, you know, Mitchell and I were, you know, we don't live here, Chris does. You know, I work out of Falmouth. It was a little unusual to us that in the middle of downtown, you have so many prohibitions for people to make turns. It's probably confusing for a lot of people when they get to that intersection, not knowing where to go. So we think it actually adds a little bit of sort of improvement and accessibility to the downtown. In terms of the bypass, yeah, we're going to slow people. I mean, this plan is going to slow people down, and we talked. You know, Jared talked about that. The plan is really thinking about sort of getting people to sort of slow down, making it a little bit more walkable and livable in the community. So it's going to add delay. You know, I haven't done a delay study, so I can't tell you that when you know you leave Maple and you want to get through State, you know how many more seconds you're going to have. I'll just say if those signals are coordinated, you may be slowing down from a speed perspective, but if you can get through the 3 signals in one phase, you may have some actual time savings. Now, the intent, I mean, to be fair, the intent is for not you to go 40 miles an hour through town. The intent is for you to really go 25, 30 miles an hour through town. So there's probably going to be some delay. Bypass is being built for a reason. You know, it's being built so that if there are people that don't have destinations in downtown, they can come downtown, certainly, if they desire. But if they don't want to go 25, you know, the bypass will do so, will allow them to do so. And that's typically, you know, when the department builds bypasses, that's one of the sort of, you know, objectives of that type of facility, to help sort of give an option for people if they so choose. And was there a tree one for Mitch?
No, there was a question in the back.
Oh, okay.
in blue.
Jim, did you have a question?
I almost forgot. Parallel parking is still in play on Main Street, is that correct? And you have sections of the street which are single lane, and somebody has to stop, parallel park, stop them, your traffic is gonna back up.
Yeah.
And you also have to remember, I think now, a lot of people don't like to parallel park, especially in traffic.
Sure.
You know, if they can just drive into a spot, yeah, that's fine.
Sure.
But to me, that seems like that's also gonna slow your traffic down. If you only have one lane going by, everybody else has to stop.
Yeah, it'll you know, there's going to be some change in terms of, you know, that, you know, I talked about slowing people down. There'll be some maneuvering getting out of spaces. You're able to use that center lane. If no one's in it, you can maneuver it. Again, we're not having any medians in that center lane. That was based upon, you know, conversations with staff about making sure that there isn't a maintenance issue, that farm trucks can get through, so there are no medians. So if someone's parking, you can slide over into that lane to get around. But I'll be honest, there'll be some disruption. I mean, that's just part of, you know, having a 2-lane roadway. Many of the villages that we have in the state have 2 lanes, and those are part of being in that urban context.
Another thing too about parking, and I'm going to say this, as much as I'm talking about pedestrians, bikes, vulnerable users, and, you know, skateboarders, I'm a car guy. You know, I love my Acura, I love my cherry red Mercedes 230. I'm actually eyeballing a Volvo Golf R. It's pretty sweet. And I'm never going to forsake the need of cars as an essential component of the American transportation system. And yes, parking is something that comes up in every community. Every community that I go to is actually asking me to take out nose and angled parking, because that actually leads to the most property damage to motorists. But through this process, we can actually make investments in municipal-owned off-system parking, and that would allow us also to have wayfinding and promote accessibility from parking that's, you know, off-system to, you know, the downtown business. And in one community that we do have going to PE, which is a town called Bucksport, you know, we had a community business owner be like, looks like you're going to take out, you know, parking for me. It's like, we're actually going to provide more parking and provide signage to direct customers to your potential business through a wayfinding program and improvements to the municipal parking. So we're not going to ever just say no parking, no cars. And, you know, God is my witness as a car bro. We're going to make sure about that. So if anybody has like a Volkswagen Golf R, you know, let me know. Want a little manual. sign this over to Tyler.
We don't drive those here. Yes, Mr. Winslow.
So, like Patty, I learned of this yesterday morning, and I've been knee deep in this since yesterday, when I first came to this meeting. So, and I've been knee deep in it with the growers that own MPG. I'm the general manager of MPG. So,
But we are a farming community.
I made the point last night that what makes this economy thrive is the agriculture, the forestry, the industry that's here. And I'm very concerned about several pieces of this plan, and one is the widths of the lanes. You know, we're showing reducing State Street Bridge to two 11-foot lanes from 4 lanes. And we know that since the bypass was theorized years and years ago, this community's changed completely. If you look at the industrial park, we have a tremendous amount of big equipment up there. We have 3 equipment dealers selling oversized equipment, Lockwood, Sputnik, and Crown Equipment. We have a lot of equipment being stored on that base in the private storages and hangars that go up there that are overlit. We have a major bag company there. We have a major rafter company there. We have a major forestry company with Columbia. Just a lot of industry. And we have probably the largest trucking company in New England on Parsons Street, right in the middle of this. So I realize your models, and I explained this to all these guys, and I spent this morning with these guys riding around in tractors up and down Main Street. Both tractors were 144 inches wheel to wheel center, so they were really 160 inches. So they were wider than the 12 lane, and we went out and looked at some windrowers and potato harvesters, and on the way out a 4-row straddle sprayer went down Main Street, which is 144 inches. So I'm just very concerned that while we do need a solution long-term for the base of Main Street, the maintenance issues, and we do need a long-term solution for storm drainage, this is a way to get that paid for. But it's also $30 million, of which the city has to commit 3.3 million of it within a month, and the city council's going to vote on it, not the citizens. As a taxpayer, I'm very concerned what the taxes are going to do to our business, but I'm most concerned about the flow of our business. We have probably a dozen farmers now that farm on both sides of Presque Isle. They don't farm on one farm anymore. And you take all these trucks and equipment, they're not going to go to the bypass to go to the airport, park their equipment. And you know, we had a combine come down from Main Street. I don't know if you saw it right after you guys left. It was Hempel's combine. It was going the exact route you're talking, from Academy to State, across the bridge, and to Parsons Street, and took a left towards Mapleton. That's not going to be a bypass route. So I know we talked about it, and you're going to consider how you could make that work. I don't see how you give up room for the promenade, as they're calling it, and still function, our economy function the way it functions today. I know it'd be beautiful if we were downtown. It'd be nice to have that work done under the street. But the piece that's missing here is we still got to do the sewer at our expense, the city's expense, below this work. What if that's another 10 million? I don't know. It could be 500,000. Could be 10 million. Who's going to pay that? And to make that decision in 30 days for my business, we are not prepared to support the city making that call in that short of a time frame based on the current conceptual plan.
It's gonna be voted on next week.
8 days from now.
It can either go to council vote for next week or for October. The original thought was for next week, just due to the funding opportunities that are coming forward to us as a city. We have an opportunity to get essentially the 10 cents on the dollar grant now. May not be available in the future. Never know. But that said, I mean, you bring up very good points, right? If you look at what just up the road, just north, right? There was a town that put in a roundabout many years ago, and it didn't work out very well. So that's why it's very important that we have these discussions, and we have these meetings, and we get this feedback, because we need to make sure that we are spending the money of the taxpayer in the right manner. And you bring up a very good point. If I may ask, Bob, if everyone doesn't know, Bob Watson, so he oversees the main DOT for this area, for Region 5, is it? And Bob, can you just talk a little bit about what we just did for the pavement, what we just did for paving Main Street, and then when we would fix if we did not do this project? Would you mind elaborating on that?
Yeah, a little bit.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so what was just done on Main Street this summer, basically the department recognized that obviously what was there was unsafe. There was maintenance issues. It was difficult to plow in the winter. There was water ponding in the summer. You've all driven it. You've all seen it. And we were trying to figure out what can we do. Honestly, what's the least we can do to get us through until a more substantial project can be funded and constructed, because we know the drainage system under there is at least from the 1950s, is probably the newest drainage that's under the ground out there. I don't know anything about the water and sewer. That all belongs to the city, so I can't speak to that. And we know there's areas where the base is bad. That's what's causing the rutting. But we had to do something to address the safety. It was a little over $1 million to do what we did this summer, which was just the bare minimum, a little bit of milling off of old pavement, you know, a little bit of shimming and a surface. And you'll see if you drive it, there's places like in the center lane where there's 5 lanes. There's a lot of places we didn't touch because we were trying to do just the bare minimum. Beyond that, I think Jared mentioned earlier, there's some PE money that exists. Was it 1.6 million? $1.6 million in PE money. We throw that term PE around a lot. Preliminary engineering is what we're talking about. There is money out there to do preliminary engineering. You know, the city kind of came forth and said, well, there's this VPI program. There's money to be had there. Right now, we're trying to do everything in a parallel track. You know, we recognize there's some structural things that need to change out there, that need to be improved. The city, I think, is trying to take advantage of the funding opportunities to basically improve the downtown, to turn it into a downtown. Right now it's, and I've heard people make comments, it's 4 lanes through town. It's a mobility corridor. It's to move from one place to the other. I think the city has, and I don't want to speak, I'm going to get myself in trouble here in a minute, but I think there's a vision from the city that the city wants to create a downtown area that people want to come to as a destination, not just a place to drive through. That was editorial. That's got nothing to do with me. But yeah, so I think that's where we're at. And as far as timing, you know, if the city chooses not to do this, honestly, I don't know. I had a conversation the other day with the head of our highway design section in Augusta. Kind of asked him that same question. I said, what if this doesn't happen? Where does that leave us? He said, well, we'll have to kind of step back and regroup and decide where we go from here. Because there is a recognition that there's some structural work that needs to take place. So I don't know if that's what you wanted me to.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to comment on all of them.
You know, it is a big ask. We understand that, and just to sort of further elaborate too on the sort of the time sensitive. You know, I have other municipalities that have not even reached the stage that Presque Isle is at. Presque Isle has pretty well completed our feasibility and analysis study, that have already voted to just go straight to PE. They've already told me they've committed their match because they just want to go right to it. And some of those are 28, 29. I just was talking with Gen2, a community that I'm working in, Pittsfield. They've actually added they've asked me to add more on to a $29 million estimated project. And I'm like, well, okay, well, I mean, sure. The truth is that this is a program that we have that the municipality initiated about 2 years ago, and this does get you a lot of bang for your buck. There are going to be some compromises or some sort of, I guess, decision points that the municipality has to make. We will be working through the PE process with those who do have concerns. But I would say that the people at Maine Department of Transportation who do the traffic analysis, provide the data, provide the models, you know, these people, when it comes to our traffic projections, are usually only off by plus or minus 100 traffic counts, like vehicle trips per day, when we do our average annual daily traffic, you know, the number of cars flowing through. So the data is sound. The models, I think, are very correct. And through this process, you know, this is a big decision for your community. You know, I'm not an advocate for it, I just deliver policy. I would say, though, that this allows the department to make these lasting, once-in-a-generation investments and improvements that, quite frankly, we just do not have. And, you know, I had one community that did hesitate, and it pushed the process back, and now they've actually reached back out to me, and we're back at square one in the planning and conceptualization phase. So it is a decision for the community, and I just want that to be known that it's not DOT saying, you know, you have to do this, but this is the process that we have to make these investments.
Thanks, Jared. Go ahead. Yes, Mike.
I just want to mention, as I was a counselor when we initiated this, there's no like zero cost option. We haven't put any serious money into our sidewalks since 1984. We know the sub-base of our downtown is got structural issues. We know the stormwater treatment has issues. I mean, our public works director said it's one of the biggest liabilities that our community currently has. And this project will address all of that. So like, you know, as you walk down through our main street and you trip on the sidewalk that's 4 inches higher than the bricks that are next to it, or you try to go across, you know, an ADA crosswalk that is completely crumbled and no longer existent, like this will fix all that. And, you know, like we call ourselves an age-friendly community. We're trying to encourage our private businesses to invest, you know, into a facade improvement grant to make our downtown look better. Like, this is an opportunity where instead of spending $5 million on sidewalks, that we can spend $3 million on fixing our whole community and making it something special. So, I feel like maybe there's some work to make sure that it works for everyone. But, you know, as somebody that is quadriplegic in a wheelchair with a beautiful service dog that still almost gets run over on a monthly basis in our downtown, like, I feel like we need to do something. And if we just continue to do nothing, which is what we did for the 10 years I was on council, we're going to get to the point where we can't afford to fix it and our town is crumbled.
Just to piggyback, I agree. We were calling on Bill talking like we can be better. To throw away $30 million and not have a downtown successful as a runner. I can't run and I'm not quadriplegic, but I can't exist at that downtown either because you'll fall over. It's very unsafe. We can build this community to help support a younger generation and just a generation with special needs that we don't have right now. I realize that $3 million is a lot. I'd be interested in knowing what percentage of the total budget of Presque Isle that is, and that will put that in perspective for the community, I think. But throwing away $30 million to put that in perspective too, I don't believe that we'll get that money again. Like, this is an opportunity that I don't think that we'll have in the future to help make the downtown better.
Thank you.
And it's innovation. I agree with that. We're a farming community. The innovation is there. We can make it better and listen to people's opinions and hopefully make it, you know, accessible for farmers and workers and college students and everyone. But I don't think we should lose the match.
Thank you.
Is the requirement of this grant to make such drastic changes as far as bigger sidewalks and trees? Is it required that they do that? Or can you apply for the grant and not make it such a drastic amount of changes? Very good question. To satisfy what we need to do without making it so.
That's a good point. I think as the application is put together, or what would go into the application, the concepts right now are very competitive. They hit all of the metrics for the merit requirements, which is improving connectivity, improving ADA compliance, improving safety for vulnerable users, as well as, you know, access to commercial, commercial facilities for underserved communities, and then improving safety and connections for educational educational facilities as well. So the package as it is pretty much, yes, I would not recommend deviating too far from that. I think your multi-use trail into the downtown from the college is a key component of this, as well as I would recommend, you know, looking at the traffic models which have been provided based on the traffic volumes for road diets in places where it is warranted, to consider having traffic calming to improve safety. So quite frankly, the overall package as it is really what I would recommend going forward with a raised grant. There will be some room to adjust certain things, and as we go through the preliminary engineering process, we may find that certain things just are not feasible to be engineered, and that's why we go through that. Right now, this has been studied and analyzed. The preliminary engineering component is where really the details get meted out. And when we do make the grant application, we do like to include the feasibility study. We do leave a little bit of wiggle room for certain modifications, but I would say you have a very good and a very competitive package as it is.
Jared, if our farming community said we really needed 12 or 13-foot lanes with 4 or 5-foot shoulders, and there's good support for that, like, does that work for the grant? Like,
I would say yes, actually, and I think that's something in the preliminary engineering process we can look out. And I would say that you've got enough real estate curb to curb right now that there's some playroom to, one, accommodate the needs of large and larger farming equipment, as well as meet the metrics for the merits of a federal grant requirement. And that's one of the nice things about having a lot of real estate to work with, is we can slide things around. And I think we've started looking at, and out of the meeting today with Mr. Linwood, when we were in the tractor, that was really fun too, thank you. You know, we started talking and realizing, oh, we did miss some things with shoulder width, with lane widths, and those are going to start being incorporated, you know, should the municipality choose to go forward.
I can expand on that a little bit. Sure. Just to expand on that, just a little bit, I'll bring up this slide from last night. So this ended up being probably the most critical slide that we showed last night. And the reason being is that a guy in the room who was very critical of the farming industry here spoke up and said, what are the shoulder widths here? You know, what are we doing about shoulders here? And I point that out to emphasize the fact that, as is shown here, this is a concept. This is a concept enough for the state to consider applying for a grant. So this is literally a drawing on top of an aerial photo. This isn't surveyed. This isn't an AutoCAD. There's nothing. It's, I would say, generally to scale. This is purely conceptual. So as an engineer, and the guy that if this ever goes forward would be the engineer record who stamps it, I wouldn't call this designed at all. So when we look at pictures like this, to answer some of your questions from yesterday and to get at what Mike's saying, you know, is there a way to look at this and say, you know, does this have to be 30 feet? What if we want these to be 12-foot lanes with 4-foot shoulders so that the things that we looked at today can happen and not interfere with some of our core business? Absolutely. That's what the PE is for. That's what the PE phase is for. So again, I emphasize, I can't speak to the schedule pressure, and I don't intend to, and I'm not going to, but with respect to how projects move from a planning stage, which is where we are, to a preliminary engineering phase, which is the next step in order to secure 10 cents on the dollar for a $30 million project, you have to go from a concept, which is sort of the equivalent of a stick figure road, to something that Ed Pelletier and Sons, Soderbergh, Sargents, whoever can bid on and build. And there's a lot to be done between where we are right now and that. And it's during that stage when these critical decisions, based on input from the community, happen. And that's when we say, how big is a harvester? 24 feet? Okay. Well, we got to figure out a way to get that through here. And can we maintain pedestrian connectivity, frankly, so that our grant proposal is still competitive? Probably. It's not definitely yes, it's not definitely no. That's why we have to do the PE. So I think it's a great question from last night, and it's a great point that Mike is making, and it just emphasizes the fact that this is a concept that is not fully baked, and that the important thing is that when we move forward, we've got to look at what are the overall needs of the community, and if we decide to move forward, come up with something that not only satisfies those, but is competitive for the grant.
Jared, two questions. The first one's for you. What's the timeline for the phase 2 of the bypass, and how will that coordinate with this project? And then my second question for Chris, how many crosswalks have been added in the preliminary design on Main Street?
Good question. I believe we have the bypass, the second phase of it, out for bid. Right now we're are we out there yet? We're looking to go out in spring. I'm actually going to let Jen take this one because she's my boss and she's more in tune with the those things. I'm actually very focused, and I have been very hyper focused on this particular project. So you want to take that one, Jen? I will say it is funded and it is in the work plan. Specific timings, I'm going to head to Jen, the director of planning.
Yeah, so the bypass phase 2 is going to go out to bid next summer, I believe. So that will be, it's, as Jared mentioned, it is funded, it's in our work plan, it is happening. So that construction will go for about 2.5 years probably. So that bypass would be open before we would start the construction of this Main Street project. So they wouldn't be happening at the same time. We would make sure the bypass is open before this is under construction.
So with respect to crosswalks, I'll just show this sort of conceptually here. What you see in this picture, you know, the short answer is that we aren't taking any away at present. You know, again, that's a great question because it's a perfect example of something that's sort of a PE level discussion and a PE level decision. What you see here in general is crosswalks at a minimum where they exist now. There are some key locations that we've considered. I don't have a specific graphic for it. You know, with respect to where the pedestrian bridge may potentially come in, you know, one place that comes to mind as an option for a crosswalk would be near the intersection of Rice Street and Main Street. So I still think of it as VIP, but O'Reilly's is there now. That's where the sidewalk kind of ends, if you will. So between the Bubble Tea Place, Park Street basically, and Rice Street, there's no sidewalk there at all. And one of the options for the Ped Bridge coming in behind Walmart, there's a mode path there now actually that people go from kind of the garden center entrance up through behind the Chinese place and get to Main Street and get to what is presently basically a goat path, which is where the grass is dead from where people walk. So yeah, a little bit further up. But the point is, you know, to answer your question, not so much the total number or are we adding them or taking away, but the signals that are used and the actual strategic location of them is what is important. So Jared talked about RRFBs, so that's just an acronym. So the signals that are down by Riverside Park, they have the small rectangular lights. That's what those are. So those are the more modern systems that would replace something like is currently at the intersection where Rodney's is. So as an example, you know, a pedestrian crossing at Rice Street, I worked for the DOT for 10 years. A lot of people walk on that street. A lot of people, someone mentioned people walking to, people that for whatever reason don't drive to Walmart or the hospital or wherever. A lot of people have to walk to these places. And so there are some places where there's probably crosswalks are needed, you know, and we look at the perfect example of a PE level decision where we look at current use, we make actual field observations, we have engagement like this, and we say, okay, well, where does it make sense to put one? You know, and you know that's again, I emphasize that's what the preliminary engineering phase is really for. So great question.
When you say there's no sidewalks on Main Street, isn't there a sidewalk from all the way past McDonald's all the way up to the cemetery?
We're only talking, when I'm saying no sidewalk, I'm talking about the west side of Main Street between Park Street and Rice Street.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about the other side.
No, I understand you're talking, again, I'm only talking about the west side. So is there a sidewalk on the other side? Yes. Does it have telephone poles in the middle of it? Yes. Do a lot of people walk on the other side still because they don't want to cross the street at Walmart? To some extent, yes. There's enough traffic there. I mean, this is one of those sort of empirical observations that we make when we come and do work like this in the town, is when you see enough foot traffic. I mean, I drive Main Street quite a bit, and I see people walking there most of the time, you know, and there's enough foot traffic there that there's a path, and the grass is dead. So, you know, it's hard to put a number on that, but in general terms, when you see that, it might be a place to look to build a sidewalk.
Yeah, just a couple of things as far as questions that we've been fielding in the last day or two and questions that have come up. So at current, the ask is that we would commit our $3 million at the next council meeting or tonight what we won't know before any of that happens is the water sewer department was engaged the first time last week, so there's no cost estimate of what that will cost the ratepayer or the taxpayer of Presque Isle to rebuild systems under the street, which are gonna have to be part of the project, regardless if they're moved under the street or not moved under the street and rebuilt where they said. We're going to have a cost for that. That will be something that is going to be a further cost. The other item that I was made aware of today by Consolidated Communications is that all of the fiber optic cables and all of the copper wire runs under Main Street, underneath the Esplanade on the right-hand southbound lane. And then next to it, all of the water sewer is in the left-hand southbound lane, which is exactly under the Esplanade where the trees are. So I'm assuming if we plant trees there, all of that has to come up and move across the street. So there are some extenuating engineering things that, of course, we haven't dealt with yet, but those are further costs that we don't know. I mean, are they $1 million or $2 million or 10 million? We don't know. So as far as us at the city level and the people you elected to represent you, we also have those on our mind as to how to address that, because this is a very attractive funding formula for the project, and to walk away from is not something that's light or easy. But on the other hand, we don't know really what this is going to cost, and we need to commit our monies before we know any of it in the current design of what we're being asked. So just to be fair, that's where we set. And we have anywhere from 8 days to 30 days plus 8 days, the next 2 council meetings, to decide on how us 7 will vote on this. So we need, honestly, your input in order to do that, because we can't do nothing. But I don't know that we have any kind of acclamation from the community to say we exactly want this, or we want something that closely follows the design that we've been shown. So I guess that's kind of the difficulty of where we sit at the moment, because it is a big ask, and we have a big need. We know the need. Mike is not wrong about anything he says. That's exactly right. So,
But I mean, just to add to that, like, and I say this as an engineer, when you engineer things, when you do your preliminary engineering, you figure out where all the challenging things are to deal with, and you engineer your plans to fit and work with that. So like, maybe you find a duck bank, or you find water and sewer that you don't want to disturb. So instead of putting trees there, you plant grass. And also, while you're engineering, you coordinate with your water and sewer and your utilities, so that when you dig everything up, instead of them having to go in and dig things up because it broke because it's 60 or 70 years old, you've got this area that's wide open, dug up, that's paid for, you know, at 90%. So I mean, the digging is, but the big expense with the watering and sewer is to dig the road up and the dirt to get to it. I mean, all I'm saying is we know we have substantial aging infrastructure in our town, and there's, like, if the engineers do a good job, there's gonna be no cheaper way to deal with it than as part of a big project like this, when you have a big contractor mobilized and scale, and like this is when you wanna do all that stuff. And it's never gonna be cheaper.
I agree. It sounds like a lot of this work needs to be done anyway. So if we have an opportunity to look at this and to do a PE study and to do that work and fund it at 90%, this work needs to be done regardless.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit.
But can I just also
No, go ahead, sorry.
Sure.
And I don't think there was any indication that this was going to be the plan. This is just the concept.
And
that the PE needs to be done. So
one value-added component of going forward with us is through the preliminary engineering process, you will have survey, and the municipality is a financial contributor with us in the PE, so we can provide survey, we'd have as-built, and I do have a municipality that does also have similar municipal water and sewer challenges that are actually under concrete. The town has concrete with also underground electrical utilities, and part of their calculus is they're actually very excited to be doing PE, and that's why they're pushing us to go to get towards PE. And I'm like, no, we do have to follow process, because we can provide, you know, survey, as-built, and we do the utility coordination within the Department of Transportation. So those are things that also I think Mike was talking about. And then two, one of our biggest challenges, I mean, I think Region 5 also can attest to this, is mobilization up here and getting people to actually do work. And we do have local contractors, but they're also busy and taxed with a lot of process. And generally people, when Maine DOT puts something out to bid, they respond. So there's that value added component to this, and then, you know, trying to time everything into one project so that we have a minimal disruption to traffic during the construction phase, which would impede all modes of traffic. And I'll let you follow up.
Go ahead.
So if we knew all of this, why didn't we bring somebody kind of on board sooner for a kind of idea of expense on all these projects?
Is that a question specific to the water and sewer?
Yeah, for the other projects. If this was kind of the idea for almost 2 years, why didn't we consider the other projects and their expense right along?
You want to talk to that?
What specific projects are we speaking about?
Water, sewer, whatever other projects are combined in this, the cables,
Why was it not considered?
why wasn't it considered at least 6 months ago? If we knew
Okay.
that they were all gonna be combined in this.
Correct.
I can speak to the utility coordination piece.
Okay, I was going to say I'm not intelligent enough in that area to speak to it.
Well,
I mean, because then we would have been more privy to a total expense, right?
Well, we would have. We would have had to survey all of our water and sewer, which would be a substantial cost. I don't have an exact number, but that would have been quite a lot more than the $100,000 we paid for the draft of for these folks to come out. But in order to assess a water and sewer, there's a camera. You essentially place a camera down there and review the system. That would be quite a substantial cost for us to do before preliminary engineering, when they do that anyway. So that would be why, but certainly a good point.
I think one just quick thing too. You know, this is a transportation study. We're the Department of Transportation. We do not usually deal with, nor will we deal with, municipal water and sewer. That's a municipal responsibility. We deal with stormwater drainage on the system, where it's the state system, and we will, you know, deal with working with, you know, the utility coordinations to relocate certain telephone poles, so long as it is demonstratable.
That would have been done through the city, not through you.
We do not do that. This transportation study is just for transportation investments and improvements, and I'm going to let Chris talk more about utilities.
So I just want to make sure I understand your question, because it sounds like what we're talking about here is all the things that sort of go along with digging up the road. So let's start with the drainage system. So the drainage system that's there now, when the last time, whether it's circa 1950s or essentially the last time that the state came through with the project, that's a capital investment on the part of the state. It becomes a municipal maintenance responsibility. So drainage, catch basins, pipes that connect them, outfalls to the stream, that's part of the project. That's included in the $30 million. Other utilities that are in the state's right-of-way, that are underneath Route 1, are the responsibility of the owner of the utility. So with respect to the city of Presque Isle, the big one is the water and sewer. So I'll use an example. Someone said something about a Verizon duct bank. I can't remember if that was hypothetical or not, but let's just say Verizon's got a duct bank in front of Star City IGA, and when we design the new drainage system, there needs to be a catch basin there or a pipe there. They have to move it, and they move it at their expense. Now, with respect to cost to the city, that we'll say is above and beyond what we're talking about here with respect to the $3.3 million to develop and build a concept here. The expense of not only moving, but if deemed necessary, replacing, upgrading, relocating, upsizing, new, what have you, changes to the municipal water and sewer are the responsibility of that owner. Now, that could take on a lot of different looks. I mean, at a minimum, if the design, whether it's for something like tree roots, which is not something that we would really consider from a design standard perspective, but to the point about that, because we would make some sort of engineering judgment about that, frankly, but if we have a drainage system component that's in the way of a water or sewer line, then we try to engineer around it, but in many cases those need to move. Now, the big question here is, what is the condition of that system? What's going to happen when we dig up the road? So that's a risk that the city has. And it's a risk that I think existed long before the city reached out to the state to engage in this program. So although those two conversations kind of go together, because we do need to dig up the road to build this project, they're in some ways a separate discussion, because they're two separate expenses. They're related because once you start digging up the road, that is the time to do it. And I will tell you unequivocally that I've never come to a town and talk to the water and sewer guys and have them say, yes, you know what, we're flush with cash, do whatever you guys want. That never happens. That never happens. So this problem that we have with the financial situation of the water and sewer is not unique, but it's by far in the best interest to get on board with a project of this magnitude for the reasons that Mike pointed out. So things like mobilization, traffic control, erosion control, excavation, backfill, pavement. You basically get all those things at 10 cents on the dollar that are components to replacing that system if you did it on your own anyway. So that in the long, is it a significant upfront cost to just deal with it when the road's dug up? Yeah, absolutely. But in the long run, is that by far the cheapest way to do it? Absolutely.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of funding opportunities too for water and sewer, whether it's Northern Waters. There's a lot of opportunities.
Mr. Willett?
What happens if this thing, we're mid-project on this, and costs are adding up really quick, and we start approaching $30 million before we're 2/3 completed on the project? What happens? This goes to 40, 45 million. Is that on, where's that funding gonna come from?
I'm going to let Jared talk about what our guarantee is.
So we did build in quite a significant contingency in the project estimate. So we actually do not anticipate those 30% contingency. And we've generally been very good at calling what it is. You know, when we go out and we ask for, you know, the commitment of the $3,070,000, you know, I don't want to speculate, but we likely would not be asking you for more. But I'll let Jen speak to that.
So this is an important question. So typically when we have these types of opportunities, we get into what we call a cooperative agreement with the town to move forward with, you know, we did one for the study phase, we would do one for PE, one for construction. And that basically outlines if there are cost overruns, who's responsible and at what ratio. So that would be addressed in the cooperative agreement. Typically what we strive for is any cost overruns are borne at the same ratio. So, you know, we would seek, you know, other federal funding, you know, for 90%, or I mean, for 80%, the state would put in another 10%, and the municipality would be responsible for 10% of those cost overruns. That's typically what we would strive for, but that would be addressed in the cooperative agreement.
I was just wondering, do you have a graphic real quick of what the sidewalk looks like on the more north end side of town? Kind of like by the Hampton. Does the sidewalk kind of go that far up?
The improvements to the sidewalk would go that far up. We don't have a specific graphic developed as to what that would look like. One thing I would emphasize, a good question, with respect to the 3-lane section, so So the 3-lane section is recommended between Lake Street and Park Street. So from Park Street north, from Park Street north, at the intersection of Park and Allen, it resumes the existing 4-lane section, and that's what's anticipated up through. So from basically Park Street to the mall, the improvements are generally access management, sidewalk improvements, potentially new sidewalk, signals, relocation of utilities that are in the middle of the sidewalk, things like that. So to answer your question, standard sidewalks 5 feet wide. So it would be.
I was thinking, I currently work at ACAP, and I cannot walk to Subway for lunch safely. I feel like if you stayed at the Hampton, walking to Rodney's for dinner would not be safe. I feel like Mike probably hasn't ridden to Walmart safely, gone to Arby's. I just think a lot more, echoing what Dr. Mannion said, who has stepped out now, but just everyone in here gets around in a car, and it definitely is safe to say that people on that end of town are on foot. So I think that unless you are aware of that, there is just a lot of foot traffic that is underserved because of it's just not safe.
I drive my wheelchair everywhere, and I don't dare to go to Walmart.
Right. I'm not meeting you for Subway at lunch, that's for sure. Like, right. Which is a real problem for the foot traffic in town that I think goes under acknowledged.
That's a good point. Thank you.
May I ask another question? At what part in the preliminary engineering phase are sidewalk ideas applied to your plans or thought about or discussed, kind of like up in the area of town where Jamie had mentioned, and even beyond, is there a possibility of a sidewalk being extended up to the North Main Street, Maysville intersection, and run along Maysville or Connector Street to the bridge that crosses the Prescal Stream? Is it possible to build an addition onto the side of that bridge that would accommodate the means for a sidewalk attached to a bridge that's already there versus installing or building a new pedestrian bridge across from North Street or across from Rice Street area behind Walmart? At what point in all of this do ideas like that get kicked around and put on paper and discussed?
That's a great question, and I got to reel myself in because I could talk about that for like 3 hours, because that's when the sort of engineering dork in me comes out, because that's really when the magic happens, to be perfectly honest with you. The way roads get designed is they get thought of in cross-section, and then that gets carried through in plan. So the answer to your question is at the beginning. So when we think about, and that's why we show graphics.
That image you showed of your, no, the other one where you were showing of the bike path and,
Black and white.
yeah, the loops.
Yep, okay, yep, I'm with you.
Where we at? Keep going. There we go.
Yep, okay.
So to the north of that, I'm trying to see in white, up by the mall, would be the northeastern section of northern part of town.
That's the mall. Just to get, so let's just get oriented for a second. So I kept it simple. North is up. So I wasn't trying to play any tricks on you there. So here's the mall. I did a project one time where North was down and it was in Fort Kent. So, and I'm not kidding. And Canada was on the bottom, and I flipped it upside down every day. So North is up, River's here, everything's where it's supposed to be. So the mall's here. Here's Walmart, Shop and Save, Rice Street, Maine DOT's office, right there. So.
I'm just thinking part of your connectivity plan with a project of this scale, you've got a middle school up on the northwesterly part of town that really doesn't have any pedestrian accessibility from the eastern side of Main Street. Same with the college. I mean, unless you were going to come down around the section by like where FW Webb is now and be on Parson Street. Central Ave. I mean, there's a big.
Yeah, I mean this is the street up to I still call it NMBTI, but up through here. So There's a sidewalk project on that street this summer, you know, so there's some connectivity potentially there. But to answer your question, we look at the existing template and we start off by coming up with what would the future cross-section be. And then what we do is we take the model of the existing terrain, so it gets surveyed. So now we have a three-dimensional model that tells us what's the ground look like now. And then we take various proposed templates and we drop them in. And the center line of the road basically stays the same. And what happens from there on out, those are our options. So that's when things like lane widths, shoulder widths, sidewalk width, where's the gutter line, how's the drainage work, all those things are really at the onset. So specific to your question about, and this is more of a sort of a, not so much a cross-sectional question, but just an overall concept question, routing of the bridge over the existing bridge as opposed to a new ped bridge, is that an option? It could be. To be honest with you, I didn't look closely at that existing bridge because it wasn't in the study area. So I didn't really go looking at it for that purpose. But really, these are the kind of discussions that fuel that initial PE. You know, it's a great question because these are the kinds of questions that, you know, in order for the city to get what they want for their money, these kind of questions have to be asked. So it's important that you're asking it.
Well, I think if you're gonna go that far with a bike path, the least you could do is go to NN.
So a segment that would continue up to the campus. Okay. And there's a fragment of a piece of, there's a section of paved trail other than the sidewalk in that area now. There's some remnants there. And there's some remnants up by, I call them remnants because they're separated already instead of being a traditional sidewalk next to the road. But there's a little bit of paved path over by MMG along what would be the south side of Maysville Street too. So, you know, using some of those fragments of existing paths to sort of tie this all together, is that something that's on the table? To answer your question, Jeff? Absolutely. Go ahead.
Just for clarification, exactly what will the councilors be voting on, either, you know, at this month's meeting or October's? Simply, they're going to proceed with the preliminary engineering, or, because there was talk about the contracts, you know, we have an agreement about overruns and who would pay what. That's down the road after the preliminary engineering, correct?
That's correct, yes. That's when we actually enter the construction. We would do the contract beforehand. So to answer your question, the council will be voting, whether it's next week or in October, they would be voting to authorize or they would be voting to commit to the project itself. The actual funding for the project would not be due until it begins, and that would be after preliminary engineering, in which, quite frankly, we would the $3 million, as currently the city would bond that $3 million for this project. That is the current process. So to answer your question, they would be voting for the commitment to the project. We would not be giving them any funding at this time. Yes, sir. So the idea of this project would be after the bypass is complete, so generally 2028 construction season, continuing into 2029, and then the idea would be to end in the fall of 2029. Any other questions? Everybody ready to go home? Folks, I do want to just close by first and foremost saying thank you very much to everyone for their feedback. Thank you for taking the time to be here. As you know, I am a new Mainer, and I will tell you, new to Presque Isle, new citizen here to Presque Isle. I'll tell you, as I see our community, as Linwood said yesterday, agriculture it's a $150 million industry. It's the lifeblood, right? Tourism is a huge industry within Presque Isle. When you think about it, as a new Presquilian, the other day, I was looking at the school calendar and I saw that my son gets 3 weeks off from high school for harvest season. So I promptly asked, what's harvest season? I had a general idea. That said, I was told that he could go pick rocks in a field. And then I talked to some folks and they said, no, they don't do that anymore because things change. The harvesters do it themselves. Now we put them in the potato houses and they pick the rocks out of there, is what I was told. Is that kind of a lot of the jobs have shifted, right? So you think about it, change is evident. Change will happen no matter what. Whether we do this or not, change will come. And, you know, we have a good opportunity here, but it's up to the community to decide and speak with their council and advise them if they feel that this is the right decision. Because no matter what, we're all going to change together. And whether this generational opportunity comes to be or not, we're still going to have to move forward and progress together as a community. So thank you all very much for taking the time to be informed. Thank you for coming by, and looking forward to what comes next. So thank you. I was coming out of the coffee shop and I found you guys, right? I would love it.